consensus narrative directs your attention to the sky. Media outlets amplify reports of new missile defense tests, showcasing launch vehicles against a clear blue backdrop. This is intentional. It is threat perception management. The objective is to anchor the concept of attack to a kinetic object, a visible, traceable projectile with a predictable arc. This is a strategic misdirection. The actual vector is silence. The primary battle space is not the atmosphere, but the abyssal plain and low Earth orbit. The critical targets are not cities. They are fiber optic cables and satellite uplinks. According to pro-Kremlin military analysts, the Russian Navy is now conventionally insolvent, admitting it cannot protect its own economic lifelines, its tankers, from interception. A state that cannot win a surface engagement does not build more targets. It changes the protocol of war. This is the blueprint for creating a blind Leviathan. The Leviathan is the interconnected global financial system, a single organism dependent on a constant flow of data for its survival. By severing its optic nerves, the undersea cables that carry 99% of all international data, you do not need to defeat it kinetically. You blind it. You induce a state of systemic paralysis where markets cannot clear, transactions fail, and navies cannot communicate. The rising frequency of ransomware attacks against the telecom sector is not random criminality. It is tactical reconnaissance. When a major power faces a national security crisis driven by economic collapse, as documented by CSIS and Homeland Security today, its strategic calculus shifts from kinetic cost to asymmetric leverage. The inability to defend its own tankers is a mathematical accelerant. The logical counter is not to launch a missile, but to create a global liquidity crisis by cutting a cable. The adversary's weakness has become a systemic liability for the entire global architecture. The conflict is not a war of choice. It is a solvency crisis. The Kremlin's initial kinetic investment failed to produce a return, transforming the campaign into a terminal domestic liability. CSIS analysis confirms the war's drain on state resources and declining public support creates a zero-sum calculation for the regime. Find a new source of leverage or face systemic collapse. This economic insolvency is mirrored by a conventional military insolvency. The system's weakness is no longer a secret. Pro-Kremlin military analysts have been forced to publicly admit a catastrophic failure. The Russian Navy is incapable of protecting its own economic lifelines. As U.S. forces interdict sanctioned vessels, Russia's inability to project conventional power to secure its own tankers is a mathematical declaration of bankruptcy. When a major power cannot compete symmetrically, it is forced to pivot. Weakness mandates a protocol of asymmetric escalation. The state must substitute the kinetic cost of a carrier strike group with the low-cost, high-impact leverage of deniable attacks. We see this vector activating now. The steady rise in ransomware attacks against critical infrastructure like the telecom sector is not random criminality. It is state-level strategic substitution. This is a predictable blueprint for state behavior under sanction-induced pressure, a pattern observed by RUSI in states like Iran, where economic crisis directly threatens national security. A state proven conventionally insolvent has no other path. It must escalate asymmetrically, from cyber to sabotage to the final and only remaining point of leverage. This is not a choice. It is a function of weakness. The weakness itself is the accelerant. The core of the asymmetric escalation protocol is not ideology. It is a solvency crisis. The entire economic model of conventional warfare has been inverted. According to a cost-of-kill analysis by RUSI, the kinetic cost to neutralize a $5 million main battle tank is now as low as $500 for a single FPV drone. This is not a simple battlefield transaction. This is the democratization of violence, the terminal collapse of the state monopoly on projecting lethal strategic force. When a major power is proven conventionally insolvent, unable to afford the kinetic cost of defending its own economic lifelines, it is mathematically forced to adopt the logic of the insurgent. The economic barrier to entry for systemic disruption has been erased. This makes a weakened adversary not a defeated one, but a cornered one with access to a new, dangerously cost-effective arsenal. The systemic friction is no longer contained to primary conflict zones. Observe the emergent regional instability, official warnings for travel to places like South Africa or even Canada. The legacy media reports this as isolated chaos. This is a fatal misreading. These are not causes, they are symptoms. More accurately, they are designated proxy laboratories. A gray zone is a theater for staging low-cost, high-impact asymmetric attacks with plausible deniability. Russia's documented naval insolvency, source number 1, means it cannot project conventional power to protect its economic lifelines. Therefore, it must substitute kinetic response with asymmetric probes. The steady rise in ransomware attacks against telecom sectors, source number 2, is not random crime. It is a blueprint. It is the methodical stress testing of Western allied infrastructure in a controlled environment where the kinetic cost of retaliation is prohibitively high. This protocol is not exclusive. States facing a systemic solvency crisis, like Iran under sanctions and currency collapse, source number 3, are forced to adopt the same playbook. It creates an ecosystem of desperation, a marketplace where asymmetric tactics are developed, tested in these gray zone labs, and proliferated. Adversary weakness becomes a shared accelerant, turning regional instability into a distributed network for refining the tools of systemic collapse. The response from Western defense architecture confirms this vector. The development of new, high-fidelity target vehicles for missile defense systems, source number 4, is not for a Cold War scenario. According to analysts at CSIS, these systems are engineered to intercept the exact class of erratic, next-generation threats perfected in these proxy laboratories. They are preparing for the final phase of the asymmetric escalation protocol, when a successful test in a gray zone graduates to a kinetic launch-on-warning scenario against a primary target. The math is irrefutable. The launch-on-warning doctrine is not a strategy. It is a protocol of desperation. It is the final circuit breaker for a nuclear power facing a decapitation strike. The logic is zero-sum. If enemy missiles are detected in the air, you launch your own before they are destroyed in their silos. The decision window is not hours, it is minutes. The cost of hesitation is total asset liquidation. This protocol was designed for an analog world. Today, its primary vulnerability is digital. According to CSIS analysis, the entire architecture, from satellite uplinks to ground-based radar, operates on telecom infrastructure. This is the same infrastructure that has seen a steady rise in ransomware and cyber attacks, as documented by industry reports. This creates the fog of digital war. An adversary, proven to be conventionally insolvent and unable to project power, as Russia is now admitting its navy cannot protect its own tankers, is forced onto an asymmetric escalation vector. They cannot win a conventional fight, so they will not fight one. Their target is not our military, but our decision-making. If a cyber attack successfully blinds an early warning system, the commander on the ground faces a binary choice with incomplete information. Is the radar offline due to a technical glitch, or is it being deliberately jammed as the prelude to a first strike? The protocol does not allow for deliberation. The absence of data becomes the data. In this scenario, fear compels the launch. The commander must assume the worst-case scenario because the kinetic cost of being wrong is non-survivable. The adversary's weakness thus becomes a mathematical accelerant for systemic collapse. They force our hand not by demonstrating strength, but by exploiting a protocol that cannot distinguish a cyber attack from Armageddon. The central liability of the global security architecture is its assumption of linear escalation. This model is now defunct. When a major power is proven conventionally insolvent, as pro-Kremlin analysts now admit of the Russian Navy's inability to protect its own tankers. Source number 1. It does not surrender. It substitutes. A protocol of asymmetric escalation is engaged, where kinetic cost is replaced by systemic leverage. The initial vector is not missiles, it is malware. The documented rise in ransomware attacks targeting the telecommunications sector is not disconnected criminality. Source number 2. It is, as confirmed by analysts at CSIS, the live fire testing of digital munitions. These are range-finding exercises to map the vulnerabilities of Western logistical and financial nervous systems. Each breach calibrates the non-kinetic cost of confrontation, establishing a new battle space where attribution is a deliberate liability. The calibration forecast. Within the next 12 months, expect a systemic, attribution impossible blackout targeting the digital infrastructure of a primary Western logistical hub. The target profile is not a power grid, but a port authority's terminal operating system or a major colocation data center servicing financial exchanges. The event will be framed as a catastrophic ransomware incident. It is the calibration shot, a mathematical signal demonstrating that economic lifelines can be severed digitally at a fraction of the kinetic cost.